on the happy life which is sad news. Seneca. All men, brother Gallio, want to be happy, but they are too stupid to understand exactly what makes life happy, and happiness is so far from being easy, that the more a man strives for it, the more he distances himself from it, if she takes the wrong path, for as he advances in the opposite direction, his own velocity pushes him farther. Therefore, we must first clearly define what we are looking for. Then we must consider which way we can reach it more quickly, because in our own journey, as long as it is in the right direction, we will know how much we progress each day, and how much we advance ourselves. We approach the goal towards which our natural desires drive us. But while we wandered randomly, not following any guide, save for the discordant cries and clamors of those who invite us to go in different directions, our short life will be wasted in useless mistakes, though we strive day and night to gain the good understanding. Let's not decide, then, where we should go and which way to go, without the advice of some experienced person who has explored the region we are going to enter, because this trip is not subject to the same conditions as the others, because in them some well understood clue and the inquiries made to the natives make it impossible for us to be mistaken. But here the most beaten and frequented clues are the ones that most lead us astray. Therefore, nothing is more important than not following, like sheep, the flock that precedes us, and thus not going where we should go, but where others are going. However, nothing causes us more trouble than our submission to common hearsay and our habit of thinking things are better when they are generally received as such, of mistaking many counterfeits for really good things, and of living not by reason but by imitation of others. This is the cause of those great heaps into which men rush until they pile up one on top of the other. In a large crowd of people, when the crowd presses close together, no one can fall without dragging another over him, and those who go in front cause destruction to those who follow. The same can be observed in human life. No one can go wrong by himself, but must become the cause and advisor of the evil of the other. It is harmful to follow in the march of those who preceded us, and as each one prefers to believe the other to form his own opinion, we never make a deliberate judgment about life, but some traditional error always involves us and leads us to ruin, and we perish. By following other men's examples, we would be cured of this if we separated ourselves from the flock. But, as it stands, the multitude are ready to fight reason in defense of their own error. Consequently, it is the same as in elections, where, when a fickle breeze of popular favor has changed, those who have been elected consuls and praetors are looked upon with admiration by the very men who made them. The fact that we all approve and disapprove of the same things, that is the end of any decision taken according to the voice of the majority. We would get cured of it if we separate from the flock. But, as it stands, the multitude are ready to fight reason in defense of their own error. Consequently, it is the same as in elections, where, when a fickle breeze of popular favor has changed, those who have been elected consuls and praetors are looked upon with admiration by the very men who made them. The fact that we all approve and disapprove of the same things, that is the end of any decision taken according to the voice of the majority. We would get cured of it if we separate from the flock. But, as it stands, the multitude are ready to fight reason in defense of their own error. Consequently, it is the same as in elections, where, when a fickle breeze of popular favor has changed, those who have been elected consuls and praetors are looked upon with admiration by the very men who made them. The fact that we all approve and disapprove of the same things, That is the end of any decision taken according to the voice of the majority. When we are considering a happy life, it cannot be answered to me as if after a division of the House, this opinion has more supporters, for precisely for that reason it is the worse of the two. Matters do not get along so well with mankind that most take the course better. The more people do a thing, the worse it is likely to be. Let us not, therefore, ask what is most commonly done, but what is the best we can do, and what will make us possess eternal happiness, not what is approved by the vulgar, the worst possible exponents of the truth. By vulgar I mean those who wear woolen capes as well as those who wear crowns, for I pay no attention to the color of the clothes they cover themselves in. I don't trust my eyes to tell me what a man is. I have a better and more reliable light in which to distinguish what is true from what is false. Let the mind discover what is good for the mind. If a man lets his mind breathe, and takes time to commune with himself, what truths will he confess to himself, after being tortured by his own self? He would say, whatever I have done up until now, I wish I had undone. When I think about what I said, I envy stupid people. It happens to me. Heavens! How much more bearable seems to be what I feared than what I desired. I have been at enmity with many men, and have exchanged my loathing for friendship, if friendship can exist between evil men. I still haven't come to terms with myself. I strove with all my strength to rise above the common herd and become remarkable for some talent. What have I got but to make myself a target for my enemies' arrows, and show those who hate me where to hurt me? Do you see those who praise your eloquence, those who covet your wealth, those who court your favor, or those who boast of your power? All of them are, or what amounts to the same thing, can be your enemies. The number of those who envy you is as great as those who admire you. Why don't I look for a good I can use and feel, not one I can show? Those goods that men contemplate with astonishment, that crowd together to see, that some point to others with mute admiration, are brilliant on the outside, but inside they are a misery for those who own them. Those who court his favor or those who boast of their power. All of them are, or what amounts to the same thing, can be your enemies. The number of those who envy you is as great as those who admire you. Why don't I look for a good I can use and feel, not one I can show? Those goods that men contemplate with astonishment, that crowd together to see, that some point to others with mute admiration, are brilliant on the outside, but inside they are a misery for those who own them. Those who court his favor or those who boast of their power. All of them are, or what amounts to the same thing, can be your enemies. The number of those who envy you is as great as those who admire you. Why don't I look for a good I can use and feel, not one I can show? Those goods that men contemplate with astonishment, that crowd together to see, that some point to others with mute admiration, are brilliant on the outside, but inside they are a misery for those who own them. Let's find some blessing that not only looks good, but healthy and good, and most beautiful in the least visible parts. Let's dig it up. It is not far from us. It can be discovered. All that is needed is to know where to reach out. Many things we want. However, not to make you digress, I'll ignore the opinions of other philosophers, because it would take too long to expound and refute them all. Take ours. However, when I say our I don't mean any of the directors of the Stoic school, because I also have the right to form my own opinion. I will therefore follow the authority of some of them, but ask others to discriminate their meaning. Perhaps, When, after having related all their opinions, they ask me for mine, I will not dispute any of the decisions of my predecessors, and I will say, I'll also add something to them. Meanwhile, I follow nature, on which all Stoic philosophers agree. True wisdom lies in not straying from nature and in shaping our behavior according to its laws and standards. A happy life, therefore, is one which is in accordance with its own nature and cannot be led unless, first of all, the mind is healthy and remains so without interruption, and then it is bold and vigorous, enduring all things with the most admirable courage, suited to the times in which he lives, care of the body and its belongings, but not problematically careful. You must also properly value all the things that adorn our lives, without overvaluing any of them, and you must be able to enjoy fortune's bounty without becoming its slave. You will understand, without my mentioning it, that an unbroken calm and freedom arises when we lay aside all things that excite or frighten us. For instead of sensual pleasures and those light and perishable things which are connected with crime's lowest lows, thus we gain immense, unchanging, and equanimous joy, together with peace, calm, and greatness of mind, and goodness, because all savagery is a sign of weakness. Our highest good can also be defined another way, that is, the same idea can be expressed in a different language. Just as the same army may spread out more widely at one moment, or contract to a lesser extent at another, and may curve towards the wings by a depression in the center line, or be drawn in a straight line, while, at any time, figure he chooses, his strength and loyalty remain undiminished. So too our definition of the greater good may in some cases be expressed in a fuzzy and lengthy way, while in others it is presented in a short and concise way. Thus it will be the same, if I say, the supreme good is a mind that despises the hazards of fortune and delights in virtue, or, it is an invincible strength of mind, knowing the world well, and in nothing bad, except shame, and who considers everything else to be a mass of petty details which can neither add nor detract from life's happiness, but come and go without adding to or diminishing the greater good. A man of such principles, like it or not, must be accompanied by continual joy, an elevated happiness, which certainly comes from above because he delights in what he has, and he desires no greater pleasures than his home affords. Have you no reason to allow the balance to be turned against the petty, ridiculous, and ephemeral movements of your miserable body? The day it becomes pleasure-proof, it also becomes pain-proof. See, on the other hand, how bad and culpable is the slavery that man is obliged to serve, dominated successively by pleasures and pains, those so unreliable and passionate masters. We must, then, escape them to freedom. It will give us nothing but contempt for fortune, but if we succeed, then these inestimable blessings will come upon us: the repose of a mind that is in a safe harbor, your elevated imaginations, your great and constant delight in rejecting error and learning to know the truth, your courtesy and cheerfulness, in all that we will delight. Since I began to make my definitions without adhering too much to the letter, a man can be called happy who, thanks to reason, has ceased to have hope or fear, but neither do stones feel fear or sadness, nor do cattle, but nobody I would call happy those who cannot understand what happiness is. With them may be classified men whose obtuse nature and lack of self-knowledge reduces them to the level of cattle, mere animals. There is no difference between the one and the other, because the latter have no reason, while the former have only one reason, form. corrupted from her, twisted and cunning to her own harm. For no one can be called happy who is outside the influence of the truth, and therefore a happy life is immutable, and rests on true and reliable discernment, for the mind is untainted and freed from all ills only when it is able to escape not only wounds but also scratches, when it will always be able to maintain the position it has taken and defend it even against furious attacks of fortune. As for sensual pleasures, even if they besieged us on all sides and used all means of assault, trying to conquer the mind with caresses and trying every conceivable stratagem to attract our whole being or our separate parts, yet how deadly would that be? Preserve some trait of human origin would you like to be pleased day and night, and, neglecting your mind, devote yourself to bodily pleasures, when she will always be able to maintain the position she has taken and defend it even against the furious attacks of fortune? As for sensual pleasures, even if they besieged us on all sides and used all means of assault, trying to conquer the mind with caresses and trying every conceivable stratagem to attract our whole being or our separate parts, yet how deadly would that be? Preserve some trait of human origin would you like to be pleased day and night, and, neglecting your mind, devote yourself to bodily pleasures, when she will always be able to maintain the position she has taken and defend it even against the furious attacks of fortune? As for sensual pleasures, even if they besieged us on all sides and used all means of assault, trying to conquer the mind with caresses and trying every conceivable stratagem to attract our whole being or our separate parts, yet how deadly would that be? Preserve some trait of human origin would you like to be pleased day and night, and, neglecting your mind, devote yourself to bodily pleasures. But, says our adversary, the mind will also have pleasures of its own. Let him have them, then, and judge luxury and pleasures. Give yourself up totally to all things that give sensual pleasures. Let him then look back to what he enjoyed before, and with all those faded sensualities fresh in his memory, let him exult and look forward longingly to those other pleasures which he experienced long ago, and which he means to experience again. And while the body lies in the impotent satiety of the present, let it send its thoughts to the future and take stock of its hopes. All this will make it appear, in my opinion, even more miserable, for it is folly to choose evil over good. Now, no madman can be happy, and no one can be sane if he regards what is harmful as the highest good and strives for it. The happy man, therefore, is he who can make the correct judgment about all things. He is happy who in his present circumstances, whatever they may be, is satisfied and in accordance with the conditions of his life. Happy is that man whose reason commends the whole position of his affairs. Even those who declare that the highest good is in the womb, see what a dishonorable position they have assigned to it, and therefore they say that pleasure cannot be separated from virtue, and that no one can live honestly without living happily, nor can they live happily without life honestly. I don't see how these very different issues can have any connection with each other. Of course, the reason is that all good things have their origin in virtue, and therefore even those things that you originally cherish and seek have their roots. However, if they were totally inseparable, wouldn't we see that some things are pleasant but not honorable, and others are really very honorable but difficult and can only be achieved through suffering? Add to this that pleasure visits lower lives, but virtue cannot coexist with a bad life, yet some unhappy people are not without pleasure. Indeed, it is because of pleasure itself that they are unhappy, and this could not happen if pleasure had any connection with virtue, whereas virtue generally has no pleasure and never needs it. Virtue is a high, sublime, real, invincible and tireless quality. Pleasure is base, servile, weak, perishable. Their places of residence are the brothel and the tavern. You will find virtue in the temple, in the market, in the Senate house, guarding the walls, covered in dust, sunburnt, with hot hands. You will find pleasure lurking, seeking shady corners in public baths, in hot chambers, and in places that fear the visits of the idle, effeminate, smelling of wine and perfume, pale or perhaps painted and made up with cosmetics. The highest good is immortal, it knows no end, and admits of no satiety or regret, for a mind that thinks aright is never altered or become hateful to itself, nor do the best things undergo any change, but pleasure dies at the very moment when we love it most. It has no far-reaching, and therefore it soon sickens and tires us, and disappears as soon as its first impulse ends. Indeed, we cannot depend on anything whose nature it is to change. Consequently, it is not even possible for there to be a solid substance in that which comes and goes so quickly, and which perishes by the very exercise of its functions, for it reaches a point where it ceases to be, and even when it is always the beginning, it keeps its end to itself. Viewed, nor do the best things undergo any change, but pleasure dies at the very moment when we love it most. It does not have far reach, and therefore soon sickens and tires us, and disappears as soon as its first impulse is over. Indeed, we cannot depend on it. Nothing whose nature it is to change. Consequently, it is not even possible for there to be a solid substance in that which comes and goes so quickly, and which perishes by the very exercise of its functions, for it reaches a point where it ceases to be, and even when it is always the beginning it keeps its end to itself. Viewed, nor do the best things undergo any change, but pleasure dies at the very moment when we love it most. It does not have far reach, and therefore soon sickens and tires us, and disappears as soon as its first impulse is over. Indeed, we cannot depend on it. Nothing whose nature it is to change. Consequently, it is not even possible for there to be a solid substance in that which comes and goes so quickly, and which perishes by the very exercise of its functions, for it reaches a point where it ceases to be, and even when it is always the beginning it keeps its end to itself. Viewed, what answer are we to give to the reflection that pleasure belongs alike to good and bad men, and that the bad take as much delight in their shame as the good in noble things? For this reason the ancients enjoined us to lead the highest life, not the most pleasant, so that pleasure should not be the guide, but the companion of a straight and honorable mind. For it is nature whom we must make our guide. Let our reason observe her and let herself be advised by her. Living happily, then, is the same as living according to nature. What that might be, I explain. If we guard the gifts of the body and the advantages of nature with care and fearlessness, as things that will soon pass away and given to us but for a day, if we do not fall under its dominion, nor allow ourselves to be enslaved by what is not part of our own being, if we assign to all bodily pleasures and external delights the same position as auxiliaries and light-armed troops occupy in an encampment, if we make them our servants, not our masters, then and only then will they have value in our minds. Man must be impartial and not be conquered by external things. He must admire only himself, feel confidence in his own spirit, and order his life in such a way that he is prepared for both good and bad luck. May your confidence not be without knowledge, nor your knowledge without firmness. May you always abide in what you once determined, and make your doctrines be unblemished. it will be understood even if I don't add it, that such a man will be calm and collected in his conduct, let him be loud and courteous in his actions. That reason is encouraged by the senses to seek the truth and derive its first principles from it. Indeed, it has no other base of operations or place from which to start in search of the truth. It must turn to itself. Even the all-encompassing universe and God who is its guide extend outward and yet return to themselves on all sides. Do our mind the same, when, following its bodily senses, it has sent through them to the things of the external world, continue to be its master and its own. Thus shall we obtain united and allied force and capacity, and obtain from it that reason which never stops between two opinions, nor is clumsy in forming its perceptions, beliefs, or convictions. Such a mind, when ordered, made its various parts agree with one another, and, if I say so, harmonized them, has achieved the highest good, because nothing evil or dangerous remains in it, nothing that shakes it or causes it to stumble. Everything will be done under the direction of its own will, and nothing unexpected will happen to it, but whatever it can do will succeed. And that, moreover, easily and quickly, without the Creator having to resort to any devious artifice, because slow and hesitant action is a sign of discord and lack of firm purpose. Therefore, you can say without fear of making mistakes that the greatest good is the unity of the Spirit, because where there is harmony and unity, there must be virtues. It is the vices that are at war with each other. Moreover, easily and quickly, without the Creator having to resort to any devious artifice, because slow and hesitant action is a sign of discord and lack of firm purpose. Therefore, you can say without fear of making mistakes that the greatest good is the unity of the Spirit, because where there is harmony and unity, there must be virtues. It is the vices that are at war with each other. Moreover, easily and quickly, without the Creator having to resort to any devious artifice, because slow and hesitant action is a sign of discord and lack of firm purpose. Therefore, you can say without fear of making mistakes that the greatest good is the unity of the Spirit, because where there is harmony and unity, there must be virtues. It is the vices that are at war with each other. But, says our adversary, you yourself only practice virtue because you hope to get some pleasure out of it. In the first place, although virtue gives us pleasure, we do not seek it for this reason, since it does not give it, but gives it in return, nor is this what he works for, but his work also conquers him. Even if it is intended for another purpose, as in a plowed field, when plowed for corn, a few flowers are found amongst it, and though these bouquets may delight the eye, all this labor has not been expended in producing them. The man who sowed the field had another object in mind, he gained it over him. So pleasure is not the reward or cause of virtue, but comes in addition to it, nor do we choose virtue because it gives us pleasure, but it also gives us pleasure if we choose it. The supreme good is in the act of choosing it and in the attitude of the noblest minds, who, when they have fulfilled their function and established themselves within their own limits, have reached the supreme good and need nothing else, because there is nothing outside of the whole, just as there is nothing beyond the end. You are wrong, therefore, when you ask me what I am looking for in virtue, because you are looking for something above the highest. You ask what I seek from virtue. I answer, to herself, for she has nothing better, she is her own reward. Doesn't that seem big enough to you when I say that the greatest good is unwavering mental strength, wisdom, magnanimity, common sense, freedom, harmony, beauty. You still ask me for something bigger, of which these may be regarded as the attributes. Why do you talk to me of pleasures? I seek what is good for man, not for his belly. Why, cattle and whales have it greater than it. And also the gossip, the pride that takes pleasure in insulting others, the laziness and decadence of a dull mind that falls asleep in itself. All this is dissipated by virtue, which tugs at man's ear, and measures the value of pleasures before allowing them to be used, nor does he attach much importance to those whom he allows to pass into the brook, for he simply permits their use, and his joy is not due to use, but to moderation in use. However, when moderation lessens pleasure, it harms the greater good. You devote yourself to pleasures, I control them. You give yourself to pleasure, I use you. You think it's the greater good, I don't even consider it good. For pleasure I don't do anything, you do everything. All this is dissipated by virtue, which tugs at man's ear, and measures the value of pleasures before allowing them to be used, nor does he attach much importance to those whom he allows to pass into the brook, for he simply permits their use, and his joy is not due to use, but to moderation in use. However, when moderation lessens pleasure, it harms the greater good. You devote yourself to pleasures, I control them. You give yourself to pleasure, I use you. You think it's the greater good, I don't even consider it good. For pleasure I don't do anything, you do everything. All this is dissipated by virtue, which tugs at man's ear, and measures the value of pleasures before allowing them to be used, nor does he attach much importance to those whom he allows to pass into the brook, for he simply permits their use, and his joy is not due to use, but to moderation in use. However, when moderation lessens pleasure, it harms the greater good. You devote yourself to pleasures, I control them. You give yourself to pleasure, I use you. You think it's the greater good, I don't even consider it good. For pleasure I don't do anything, you do everything. When I say that I do nothing for pleasure, I mean that wise man, who only you admit to be capable of pleasure, well, I don't call him wise who lets himself be conquered by nothing, and even less by pleasure, without however, if he is absorbed in pleasure, how will he resist work, danger, want, and all the evils that surround and threaten the life of man? How will he bear the sight of death or pain? How will he withstand the turmoil of the world and face so many active enemies, if he is conquered by such an effeminate antagonist? He will do whatever he is pleased to advise him to do. Well, don't you see how many things he will advise you to do? He cannot, says our adversary, give him bad advice, because it is combined with virtue. Also, do you not see what a poor sort of supreme good that must be that requires a guardian to ensure that it is good? And how does virtue govern pleasure if it follows it? Since to follow is the duty of a subordinate, to govern is the duty of a commander. According to your school, virtue has the worthy office of preliminary taster of pleasures. Yet we shall see whether virtue remains virtue among those who treat it with such contempt, for if it leaves its proper place it can no longer retain its own name. However, to get right to the point, I will show you many men pursued by pleasures, men upon whom fortune has lavished all her gifts, to whom you must admit they are bad. Behold Montano and Apicius, who digest all good things, as they call them, from sea and land, and review the whole animal kingdom at their tables. They see them lying in beds of roses, basking in their feast, delighting their ears with music, their eyes with displays, their palates with tastes. Their whole bodies are aroused by gentle and soothing applications, so that even their nostrils are not idle. The same place where the rites of luxury were celebrated is perfumed with various perfumes. You will say that these men live in the midst of pleasures. However, they are wrong, because they indulge in what is not good. You will say that these men live in the midst of pleasures. However, they are wrong, because they indulge in what is not good. You will say that these men live in the midst of pleasures. However, they are wrong, because they indulge in what is not good. They are in a bad situation, he replies, because too many things arise to distract their thoughts, and their minds are restless with conflicting opinions. I admit this to be true, yet these same men, foolish, inconsistent, and sure of remorse as they are, derive great pleasure from it, and we must admit that, in so doing, they are as far from feeling any discomfort as they are from forming a right opinion. On trial, and who, as is the case with many people, are possessed by a gleeful madness, and laugh while raving. The pleasures of the wise, on the contrary, are smooth, decorous, bordering on monotony, controlled and almost imperceptible, and they are not invited to come nor received with honor when they come of their own accord, nor are they greeted with any pleasure. For those who visit, who mix them with their lives and fill in the empty spaces with them, like an amusing farce in the intervals of serious business. Let them not continue, then, to join incongruous things, nor to link pleasure with virtue, an error for which they court the worst men. The reckless spendthrift, always on drink and belching the vapors of wine, believes that he lives with virtue, because he knows that he lives with pleasure, since he hears that pleasure cannot exist without virtue. Consequently he calls his vices wisdom, and flaunts all that he ought to hide. Thus men are not encouraged by Epicurus to riot, but the vicious hide their excesses in the bosom of philosophy and go to schools where they hear the praises of pleasure. They do not consider how sober and moderate, for such, by Hercules, I think it is Epicurus' pleasure, but they attack its mere name, seeking to obtain some protection and cover for their vices. They lose, therefore, the only virtue that their bad life possessed, that of being ashamed of doing evil, for they praise what they used to be ashamed of, and boast of their vices. So modesty can never be reasserted, when shameful idleness is worthy of an honorable name. The reason why your school's praise of pleasure is so harmful is because the honorable part of its teaching goes unnoticed, but the degrading part is seen by all. Modesty can never be reasserted, when shameful idleness is worthy of an honorable name. The reason why your school's praise of pleasure is so harmful is because the honorable part of its teaching goes unnoticed, but the degrading part is seen by all. Modesty can never be reasserted, when shameful idleness is worthy of an honorable name. The reason why your school's praise of pleasure is so harmful is because the honorable part of its teaching goes unnoticed, but the degrading part is seen by all. I myself believe, though my Stoic comrades will not hear me say it, that Epicurus' teaching was right and holy, and even, on closer examination, stern, for much of the talk of pleasure boils down to a very narrow scope. And he asks pleasure to submit to the same law that we ask virtue, namely, to obey nature. Luxury, however, is not satisfied with what is enough for nature. What is the consequence? Whoever thinks that happiness consists in laziness and the alternations of gluttony and waste, requires a good standard for an evil action, and when he becomes an Epicurean, having been led to it by the attractive name of that school, he follows, not the pleasure spoken of there, but the one he took with him, and, having learned to think that his vices coincide with the maxims of that philosophy, he gives himself to them no longer timidly and in dark corners, but boldly in full view of the day. I will not say, then, like the majority of our school, that the Epicure sect is a master of crime, but what I am saying is, they speak ill of it. It has a bad reputation, but it does not deserve it. Who can't know this without being admitted to its inner mysteries? His very exterior causes scandal, and encourages men's lowest desires. He is like a brave man in woman's clothing. His chastity is assured, his manhood secured, his body is subject to nothing shameful, but his hand holds a drum like a priest's eagle. Let him choose, then, some honorable enrollment for his school, some writing which in itself awakens the mind. That which is now at his door was invented by vices. He who places himself on the side of virtue thus gives proof of his noble disposition. He who follows pleasure appears weak, worn out, degrading his manhood, liable to fall into infamous vices, unless one discriminates his pleasures so that he may know which remain within the bounds of natural desire, which are frantic and boundless. And they become all the more insatiable the more satisfied they are. But come on. Let virtue guide us on the way, then each step will be safe. Excess pleasure is harmful, but with virtue there is no need to fear any kind of excess, because moderation is contained in virtue itself. What is damaged by its own extension cannot be a good thing. Besides, what better guide can there be than reason for beings endowed with a rational nature? So, if this combination pleases you, if you are willing to go on to a happy life in this company, let virtue guide the way and carry the standard. We will take pleasure in it all, but we will be its masters and controllers. She may win some concessions from us, but she won't force us to do anything. Those, on the contrary, who have allowed pleasure to lead the vain, have neither the one nor the other, for they completely lose virtue, and yet have no pleasure, but are possessed by it, and are tortured by its absence, or stifled by its absence. Excess, being miserable if abandoned by it, and still more miserable if oppressed by it, like those who are caught in the shoals of the Sirtes and at one moment are left on dry land and at others tossed in the flowing waves. This arises from an exaggerated lack of self-control and hidden love of evil, for it is dangerous for him who seeks evil rather than good to reach his goal. As we hunt wild beasts with toil and danger, and even when they are caught, we find them in anxious possession, as they often tear their guardians to pieces, so too are they great pleasures. They become great evils, and make their owners prisoners. The more numerous and larger they are, the more inferior and the slaves of more masters that man becomes what the vulgar call a happy man. I can even insist more on this analogy, like the man who tracks wild animals to their hiding places, and who attaches great importance to, the more numerous and larger they are, the more inferior and the slaves of more masters that man becomes what the vulgar call a happy man. I can even insist more on this analogy, like the man who tracks wild animals to their hiding places, and who attaches great importance to, the more numerous and larger they are, the more inferior and the slaves of more masters that man becomes what the vulgar call a happy man. I can even insist more on this analogy, like the man who tracks wild animals to their hiding places, and who attaches great importance to, searching with traps for wandering brutes to bind and making your dogs the spacious clearing around. But what, asks our adversary, is there to prevent virtue and pleasure being combined, and a greater good being thus formed, that honor and pleasure are the same thing? Because nothing but what is honorable can be a part of honor, and the highest good would lose its purity if it saw within itself anything other than its own better part. Even the joy that arises from virtue, though it is a good thing, is still not part of the absolute good, any more than joy or peace of mind, which are good things indeed, but which merely follow the highest good and do not contribute to the highest good, to their perfection, though they be generated by the noblest causes. Whoever, on the other hand, forms an alliance, and this too, the one-sided one, between virtue and pleasure, clogs whatever strength the one may possess by the weakness of the other, and sends freedom under the yoke, for freedom can only remain unconquered so long as she knows nothing more valuable than herself, for he begins to need the help of fortune, which is the most absolute bondage. His life becomes anxious, suspicious, timid, fearful of accidents, waiting in agony for critical moments of time. You do not grant virtue a solid and immovable foundation if you propose it to rest on what is unstable, and what can be so unstable as dependence on mere chance, and the vicissitudes of the body and of those things that act upon the body. How can such a man obey God and receive everything that happens in a cheerful spirit, never complaining about fate, and putting the good build on everything that happens to him, if he is agitated by the little pinpricks of pleasures and pains? A man cannot be a good protector of his country, a good avenger of its wrongs, or a good defender of his friends, if he is inclined to pleasure. Let the highest good, then, rise to that height, whence no force can dislodge it, where neither pain can ascend, nor hope, nor fear, nor anything else that can undermine the authority of good. Higher virtue alone can make her way. With her help that hill must be climbed. She will stand bravely firm, and bear whatever may befall her not only resignedly, but even willingly. She will know that all hard times come in obedience to natural laws, and like a good soldier she will bear wounds, count scars, and when transfixed and dying will still adorn the general she falls in love with. She will have the old maxim "follow God" in her mind. On the other hand, he who grumbles, complains, and laments himself, is nevertheless forced to obey orders, and is dragged, however much against his will, to carry them out. Yet what folly is it to be dragged instead of to follow? So great, by Hercules, as it is madness and ignorance of one's true position to suffer because one has nothing or because something has caused us rude treatment, or to be surprised or indignant at the evils that befall good men as well as bad ones, I mean, sickness, death, disease, and the other criss-cross accidents of human life. Let us bear with magnanimity whatever the system of the universe makes it necessary for us to bear. We are all bound by this oath. True happiness, therefore, consists in virtue. And what will that virtue ask of you? Do not think of anything bad or good that has nothing to do with either virtue or evil, and secondly, both impassively bear the onslaughts of evil, and, as far as possible, form a god of what is good. What reward does he promise you for this campaign? A huge one, and one that elevates you to the level of the gods. You will not be subject to any restriction or want. You will be free, safe, unharmed. You will not fail at anything you try. You will not be excluded from anything. Everything will go according to your wish. No misfortune will befall you. nothing will happen to you except what you hope and want. What? Is virtue alone enough to make you happy? Well, of course, an accomplished and divine virtue like this is not only enough, but more than enough, because when a man is placed beyond the reach of any desire, what can he lack? If all you need is concentrated within yourself, how can you demand anything from outside? On the other hand, he who is only in the path of virtue, though he has made great progress in it, nevertheless needs some favor from fortune while he is torn between mere human interests, while he is untying that knot and all the ties that bind him. He, tied to mortality. So what is the difference between one and the other? It's just that some are more or less strongly bound by these bonds, and some have even bonded with them too, while he who has progressed to the higher regions and risen up carries a looser chain, and though he is not yet free. Why are you upset when you suffer losses and cry when you hear about the death of your wife or your friend? Why do you pay attention to common rumor and feel irritated by slanderous gossip? Why is your property maintained longer than its natural use requires? Why don't you dine according to your own maxims? Why is your furniture smarter than it needs to be? Why do you drink wine that is older than you? Why are your foundations exposed? Why do you plant trees that offer nothing but shade? Why does his wife wear the price of a rich man's house in her ears? Why are your children at school dressed in expensive clothes? Why is it a science to wait for you at the table? Why is your silver plate not placed haphazardly or at random, but cleverly arranged in regular order, with a superintendent to preside over gastronomic sculpture? Add to this, if you like, the questions: why do you own property across the seas? Why do you own more than you know? It is a shame for you not to know your slaves by sight, for you must be either too careless of them if you have but a few, or too extravagant if you have too many for your memory to retain. I will add some censures later, and bring more accusations against me than that you think. For the time being, I will give the following answer. I am not a wise man, and I will not be one to feed your spite. Therefore do not require me to be on a level with the best of men, but only to be better than the worst. I am satisfied, if every day I take something out of my vices and correct my faults. I have not arrived at perfect soundness of mind. Indeed, I never will. I compose palliatives instead of remedies for my gout, and am satisfied if it comes at a rarer interval, and does not break out so painfully. Compared with her feet, which are lame, I am a pilot. I make this speech, not in my own name, as I am steeped in vices of all kinds, but in the name of one who has made some progress in virtue. You talk one way, objects are adversary, and you live another. You, the meanest of creatures, you who always show the bitterest hatred to the best men. This reproach was hurled at Plato, at Epicurus, at Zeno, for they all declared how they ought to live, not how they lived. I speak of virtue, not of myself, and when I blame vices, I blame mine first. When I have power, I will live as I must. Ressentiment, however deeply contaminated by poison, will not keep me from what is better. That same poison that you splash on others, drown yourself in, will not prevent me from continuing to praise that life that, in fact, I do not lead, but that I know I must lead, of loving virtue and follow it, even at a great distance and with steps insecure. I must hope that bad speech respects some occurrence, since he respected neither Rudely used nor Cato. Does anyone care if he is considered too rich by men for whom Diogenes the Cynic was not poor enough? That energetic philosopher fought against all the desires of the body, and he was even poorer than the other cynics, for in addition to having renounced having anything, he had also renounced asking for anything, yet they upbraided him with not being needy enough, as if it were poverty, and not virtue, which he professed to know. He had also given up asking for anything, yet they upbraided him with not being needy enough, as if it were poverty, and not virtue, which he professed to know. He had also given up asking for anything, yet they upbraided him with not being needy enough, as if it were poverty, and not virtue, which he professed to know. It is said that Diodorus, the Epicurean philosopher, who in these last days ended his own life, did not act in accordance with the precepts of Epicurus, when he cut his throat. Some prefer to regard this act as the result of folly, others of imprudence. He, however, happy and full of conscience of his own goodness, testified of himself by his way of departing life, praised the repose of a past life anchored in a safe haven, and said what he does not know he would like to hear, because you should too. I lived, I ran the race that fortune imposed on me. You argue about another's life and death, and shout at the names of men whom some peculiarly noble quality has made great, as tax do when they approach strangers, because it is in your interest that no one looks good, as if virtue in another there was a censure of all his crimes. You compare with envy the glories of others with your own filthy actions, and you do not understand how it hurts to venture to do so, for if those who follow virtue are covetous, lustful, and lovers of power, what must you be? That you hate the very name of virtue. You say that no one lives up to their professions, nor lives up to the standard they set in their speeches. What a marvel, seeing the words they utter are brave, gigantic and capable of withstanding all the storms that wreck humanity, while they themselves strive to free themselves from the crosses on which each one of you nails his own nail. Yet the men who are crucified hang on a single pole, but these punishers are divided among as many crosses as there are lusts, and yet they are given to evil speaking, and are so magnificent in their contempt of the vices of others, that I suppose would have none of them were it not for the fact that some criminals, when they are hanged, spit at the spectators. But these punishers are divided between as many crosses as there are lusts, and yet they are given to bad-mouthing, and are so magnificent in their contempt of the vices of others, that I suppose I would have none of them, were it not for the fact that some criminals, when they are hanged, spit at the spectators. But these punishers are divided between as many crosses as there are lusts, and yet they are given to bad-mouthing, and are so magnificent in their contempt of the vices of others, that I suppose I would have none of them, were it not for the fact that some criminals, when they are hanged, spit at the spectators. Philosophers do not put into practice everything they teach. No, but they do much good by their teachings, by the noble thoughts they conceive in their minds, that they may act upon their words. What could be happier than them? But meanwhile you have no right to despise good words and hearts full of good thoughts. Men deserve to be commended for devoting themselves to profitable studies, even if they yield no results. Why should we be surprised if those who start up a steep path cannot climb very high? However, if you are a man, look with respect at those who attempt great things, even if they fall. It is the act of a generous spirit to yield its efforts, not to its own strength, but to that of human nature, to entertain high aims, because how could he have done better for me? He gave me only everyone, and everything only me. All that I have, I will not hoard up greedily, nor squander it recklessly. I will think that I do not own goods as real as those I have given to deserving people, consider it a great gift if bestowed on a worthy object. I will do nothing for public opinion, but everything for conscience. Whenever I do something myself, I will believe that the eyes of the Roman people are on me while I do it. In eating and drinking, my aim will be to satisfy nature's desires, not to fill and empty my belly. I will be kind to my friends, kind and gentle to my enemies. I will grant pardon before they ask, and fulfill the wishes of half-honorable men. I will bear in mind that the world is my homeland, that their rulers are the gods and that they are above hand around me, criticizing everything I do more safe. When nature again demands my breath, or reason asks me to discard it, I will leave this life, calling everyone to testify that I loved the good conscience and the good offices, that no one's freedom, least of all mine, was diminished because of me. He who establishes these rules of his life will rise up and strive to make a way for the gods. Indeed, even if he fails, still fail at a great company. But you, who hate virtue as much as those who practice it, do nothing to surprise us, for diseased lights cannot bear the sun, creatures of the night shun the glare of day, and at the first dawn are perplexed and confused. They all take refuge together in their lairs. Creatures that fear the light lurk in crevices. Then squawk and exercise your wretched tongues in rebuking good men. Open your jaws wide, bite hard, you will break many teeth before you make any impression. He follows them carelessly. Where, indeed, can fortune more safely invest wealth than in a place where it can always be retrieved without any dispute with its trustee? Marcus Cato, when he praised Curio and Caruncanio and that century in which the possession of a few small pieces of silver was a crime punishable by the censor, himself owned 4,000,000 sesterces, a smaller fortune, no doubt, than Crassus, but greater than Cato the censor. In comparison with numbers he had surpassed his great-grandfather more than he himself was surpassed by Crassus, and if he had been bestowed with still greater riches he would not have despised them, for the wise man does not consider himself unworthy of any casual gift. No, he loves riches, but would rather have them. He does not receive them into his spirit, but only into the house. Who can't doubt, however, that the wise man, if he is rich, has a wider field for the development of his faculties than if he is poor, since in the latter case the only virtue he can display is that of not perverting or crushing himself because of his poverty, whereas if he has riches, he will have a wide field for the display of temperance, generosity, industriousness, orderliness, and greatness. The wise man will not despise himself, however low he may be, but will desire to be tall, although he is weak and one-eyed. He may be in good health, but he prefers physical strength, and this, knowing at the same time that he is something to do it still more powerful, it will endure disease and hope for good health, because some occurrences, though they are insignificant compared to the sum total, and though they can be removed without destroying the main good, they add something to that constant joy which arises from virtue. Riches encourage and cheer a man, just as a sailor rejoices in a favorable wind that blows his way, or as people delight in a fine day or a sunny place in cold weather. What wise man, I mean, of our school, whose only good is virtue, can deny that even those things which we call neither good nor bad have in themselves a certain value, and that some of them are preferable to others? To some of them we show some respect, and to others much. Make no mistake, then, riches belong to the class of desirable things. Why then, you say, do you laugh at me, since you put them in the same position with me? Do you want to know how different the position we put them in? If my riches fail me, they will take nothing but themselves with them. You will be disconcerted and seem to be without you if they let you. To me riches have a certain place, but to you they have the highest place of all. In short, my riches belong to me, you to your riches. Cease, then, to forbid philosophers to have money. No one has condemned wisdom to poverty. The philosopher may possess ample wealth, but he will not possess wealth that which has been wrested from another, or which is stained with another's blood. His must be obtained without harming any man, and without its being gained by base means. It must be equally and honorably come and honorably spent, and it must be such that only in spite can it shake its head. Elevate it to any figure you like, it will still be an honorable possession if, while it includes much that every man would like to call his own, there is nothing that anyone can say is his. Such a man will not lose his right to the favor of fortune, and will not boast of his inheritance or blush for it if it has been honorably acquired. However, he will have something to brag about. If he opens his house, let all your countrymen come among your property and say, if anyone here recognizes any object that belongs to you, let him take it. What a great man, how excellently rich he will be, if after this speech he has as much as before. I say, then, that if he can safely and confidently submit his reports to the scrutiny of the people, and none can find in them any item on which he can lay his hands, such a man may boldly and undisguisedly enjoy his riches. The wise man will not let a single ill-earned penny cross his threshold, yet he will not refuse nor shut his door against great riches, if they be the gift of fortune and the product of virtue. What reason has he to loathe them? Good quarters, let them come and be his guests. He will neither boast of them nor hide them. The one is the part of a fool, the other of a cowardly and insignificant spirit, who, as it were, stifles a good thing in his lap. Nor will he, as I said before, drive them out of his house, for what will he say? Will he say, you are worthless, or I don't know how to use riches? As he is able to undertake a journey under his own feet, but would still prefer to ride a carriage, so he will be able to be poor, but will want to be rich. He will possess wealth, but he will see it as an uncertain possession that will one day fly away from him. He will not let it be a burden either to himself or to anyone else. He will give it to you. Why do you prick your ears? Why do you open your pockets? He will give it to good men or those whom it can make good men of. He will give it after having taken the greatest precautions to choose those who are most apte to receive it, as one becomes one who bears in mind that he must give an account of what he spends as well as what he receives. He will give for good and praiseworthy reasons, for an ill-given gift counts as a shameful loss. He will have a pocket easily opened, but not one with a hole in it, so that much may be taken out of it, but nothing may fall out of it. Anyone who thinks that giving is an easy thing is wrong. It offers very great difficulties. If we give our generosity rationally and not distribute it impulsively and randomly, I do this man the service, to correspond to a good deed he has done me. I help this other man because I feel sorry for him. I teach this other that it is not a fit object for poverty to retain or degrade. To some men I will give nothing, though they need it, for though I give it, they will still need it. I will give my bounty to some and force others. I cannot neglect my own interests while I do this. I never owe more people to myself than I owe when I am giving objects. What, you will say, you give to receive again. In any case, I don't give to throw away my generosity. What I give must be placed in such a way that, even if I cannot ask for its return, it will be returned to me. A profit should be invested like treasure buried deep in the earth, which you wouldn't dig up unless you really needed it. What opportunities for bestowing benefits does the mere house of a rich man offer? For who considers that generous behavior is due only to the wearer of the toga? Nature asks me to do good to men. What difference is there in their being slaves or free, born free or emancipated, or whether their freedom was lawfully acquired or bestowed by agreement between friends? Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for profit. Consequently, money can be distributed even within the very threshold, and a field can be found for the practice of gratuitousness, which is so called not because it is our duty to free men, but because it originates in a mind born free. In the case of sage, it never falls into vile and unworthy vessels, and it never runs out to the point where it does not flow, whenever he finds a valuable object, as if his store had not diminished. Therefore, you have no reason to misunderstand the honorable, courageous, and courageous language which you hear from those who study wisdom, and, above all, observe this, that a student of wisdom is not the same as a man who has perfected himself in it. The former will say to you, in my lecture I express the most admirable sentiments, but I am still torn between innumerable evils. You must not force me to act according to my rules. At this moment I am forming myself, molding my character and striving to rise to the height of a great example. If I ever manage to accomplish all that I set out to do, then you can't demand that my words and my actions match it. But one who has reached the pinnacle of human perfection will treat you differently and say, you mustn't be allowed to judge their superiors. I have already obtained a proof of my righteousness by having become the object of the dislike of evil men. However, to give you a rational answer, that I envy no one, hear what I declare, and at what price I value all things. Riches, I say, are not a good thing, because if they were, they would make men good. Learn, then, since we both agree that they are desirable, what is my reason for counting them among the good things, and in what respects I would behave differently towards you if I had them. Place me lord over a very rich man's house, place me where gold and silver are used for the most common purposes. I will no longer think of myself for things that, although they are in my house, are not part of me. Take me to the wooden bridge and put me there among the beggars. I will not despise myself for sitting among those who extend their hands to beg, for what does the lack of a piece of bread matter to someone who does not lack the power to die? It is well. I prefer the magnificent house to the beggar's bridge. Place me among magnificent furniture and all the luxury trinkets. I will not believe myself happier because my cloak is soft, because my guests rest in the purple. Change the scenery. I shall no longer feel miserable if my weary head rests on a bale of hay. If I lie down on a circus cushion, all the stuff about to spill over its frayed pieces of cloth. Then, I prefer, as far as my feelings are concerned, to show myself in public dressed in wool and office clothes, rather than with bare or half-covered shoulders. I would like that every day's affairs go as I wish, and that new congratulations steadily follow to the former. I will not be proud of it, however, to exchange all this good fortune for its opposite. Let my spirit be distracted by losses, sorrows, attacks of various kinds. Let no hour pass without some quarrel. Not for him, though harassed by the greatest miseries, will I call myself the most miserable of beings, nor will I curse any particular day, for I have seen to it that I have no unlucky days. So what is the result of all this? It's just that I'd rather have to regulate joys than drown sorrows. The great Socrates would tell you the same. Make me, he would say, the conqueror of all nations. Let the voluptuous chariot of Bacchus carry me in triumph to Thebes from sunrise. Let the kings of the Persians receive laws from me. Yet shall I feel a man at the very moment when everyone around me hails me like a god. He immediately connects this lofty height with a headlong plunge into misfortune, being placed in a foreign chariot that I may grace the triumph of a wild and proud conqueror. I will follow another's chariot with no more humility than when I was in my own. So what? Despite all this, I'd rather be a conqueror than a captive. I despise all of fortune's domains, yet if I could choose, I would choose its best parts. I will make what happens to me a good thing, but I prefer what happens to me to be comfortable and pleasant, and do not make me uncomfortable, for it must not be supposed that no virtue exists without work, but some virtues need stimulation, while others need the bridle. Just as we have to break our body on a downward path and urge it to climb a steep one, so the path of some virtues leads downwards, that of others upwards. We can doubt that patience, valor, constancy and all other virtues that have to face strong opposition and trample fortune, are rising, fighting, overcoming a steep climb. Why is it not equally evident that generosity, moderation, and kindness break down so easily? With the latter we must retain our spirit, lest it flee with us. With the first we must guide and encourage it. We must, therefore, apply those energetic and combative virtues to poverty, and to wealth those more parsimonious ones that stumble a little and only support their own weight. This being the distinction between them, I prefer to deal with those that I can't practice with relative ease than those that can only be tested with blood and sweat. Therefore, says the sage, I do not speak one way and live another, but you do not correctly understand what I say, only the sound of my words reaches your ears, you do not try to discover their meaning. Do moderation and kindness crumble so easily? With the latter we must retain our spirit, lest it flee with us. With the first we must guide and encourage it. We must, therefore, apply those energetic and combative virtues to poverty, and to wealth those more parsimonious ones that stumble a little and only support their own weight. This being the distinction between them, I prefer to deal with those that I can't practice with relative ease than those that can only be tested with blood and sweat. Therefore, says the sage, I do not speak one way and live another, but you do not correctly understand what I say, only the sound of my words reaches your ears, you do not try to discover their meaning. Do moderation and kindness crumble so easily? With the latter we must retain our spirit, lest it flee with us. With the first we must guide and encourage it. We must, therefore, apply those energetic and combative virtues to poverty, and to wealth those more parsimonious ones that stumble a little and only support their own weight. This being the distinction between them, I prefer to deal with those that I can't practice with relative ease than those that can only be tested with blood and sweat. Therefore, says the sage, I do not speak one way and live another, but you do not correctly understand what I say. Only the sound of my words reaches your ears. You do not try to discover their meaning. With the first we must guide and encourage it. We must, therefore, apply those energetic and combative virtues to poverty, and to wealth those more parsimonious ones that stumble a little and only support their own weight. This being the distinction between them, I prefer to deal with those that I can't practice with relative ease than those that can only be tested with blood and sweat. Therefore, says the sage, I do not speak one way and live another, but you do not correctly understand what I say. Only the sound of my words reaches your ears. You do not try to discover their meaning. With the first we must guide and encourage it. We must therefore apply those energetic and combative virtues to poverty, and to wealth those more parsimonious ones that stumble a little and only support their own weight. This being the distinction between them, I prefer to deal with those that I can't practice with relative ease than those that can only be tested with blood and sweat. Therefore, says the sage, I do not speak one way and live another, but you do not correctly understand what I say. Only the sound of my words reaches your ears. You do not try to discover their meaning. I'd rather deal with those I can't practice with relative ease than those who can't only be tested with blood and sweat. Therefore, says the sage, I do not speak one way and live another, but you do not correctly understand what I say. Only the sound of my words reaches your ears. You do not try to discover their meaning. I'd rather deal with those I can't practice with relative ease than those who can't only be tested with blood and sweat. Therefore, says the sage, I do not speak one way and live another, but you do not correctly understand what I say. Only the sound of my words reaches your ears. You do not try to discover their meaning. What difference is there, then, between me, who am a fool, and you, who are a wise man? All the difference in the world, because riches are slaves in a wise man's house, but masters in a fool's house. You get used to them and cling to them as if someone had promised you that they would be yours forever. But a wise man never thinks so much of poverty as when he is surrounded by riches. No general relies so implicitly on the keeping of the peace, that he does not prepare for a war which, though not actually fought, has been declared. You are arrogant, good house, as if it could never be burnt or destroyed, and riches make you turn your head as if they were beyond the reach of all dangers and were so great that fortune had not strength enough to swallow them up. You sit idly playing with your riches and do not foresee the dangers that await you, as savages usually do when they are besieged, for, not understanding the use of siege artillery, they look idly at the work of the besiegers and do not understand the use of siege artillery, object of the machines that are arming at a distance. And that is exactly what happens to you. You sleep in your estate and never reflect on how many misfortunes threaten around you on all sides, and you will soon be despoiled of costly spoils. But if wealth be taken from the wise man, he is still in possession of all that is his, because he lives happily in the present and without fear of the future. The great Socrates, or any other who had the same superiority and power to withstand the occurrences of this life, would say, I have no more fixed principle than not to alter the course of my life to suit your prejudices. You can pour your usual talk about me on all sides. I will not think that you mistreat me, but only lament like poor babies. Thus will say the man who possesses wisdom, whose mind, being free from vice, compels him to reprove others, not because he hates them, but to improve them. And to this he will add, your opinion of me affects me with pain, not for my own good, but for yours. Because to hate perfection and attack virtue is in itself a renunciation of all hope of doing good. You do me no harm, nor do men harm the gods. Then they destroy their altars, but it is clear that your intention is evil and that you will want to harm even where you cannot. I bear your gossip in the same spirit as Jupiter, the greatest and the best, bears the fables of the poets, one of whom represents him with wings, another with horns, another as an adulterer who spends the night away, another who treats the gods harshly, another as unjust to men, another as seducer of young nobles he takes by force, and those, by the way, his own relatives, another as patricide and conqueror of someone else's kingdom and his father. The only result of such stories is that men feel less ashamed of committing sins if they believe that the gods are guilty of such actions. But although this conduct of yours does not harm me, nevertheless, for your good, I advise you to respect virtue, believe in those who, for a long time followed it, cried that what they follow is a powerful thing, and every day it seems more powerful. Revere her as the gods, and revere your followers as the priests of the gods, and whenever any sacred scripture is mentioned, fide linguis, favor us with silence. This word does not derive, as most people imagine, from favor, but enjoins silence, to that the divine service may be performed without being interrupted by any ominous word. It is far more necessary that this should be enjoined upon you, that whenever this oracle is uttered you should listen attentively and in silence. Every time someone hits the rattled sound of a sistrum, doing so by divine command, any expert at brushing their own skin covers their arms and shoulders in blood. With light cuts, any man crawls on his knees howling down the street. Here it is. From that prison of his, which, on entering, he purified from shame and became more honorable than any senate house, Socrates addresses you, saying, "What madness is this of yours? What is this disposition, at war with gods and men, which leads you to slander virtue and outrage holiness with malicious accusations? Praise good men, if you are able, if not, pass them over in silence. If indeed you rejoice in this offensive abusiveness, you fall one on the other. Others, because when you decline against heaven, I do not say that you commit sacrilege, but you waste your time. I once gave Aristophanes the subject of a joke. Since then the whole team of comic poets has left me a mark by their poisoned wit. My virtue was made to shine more brightly by the very blows dealt it, for it is advantageous to be brought public and exposed to temptation, nor does any people understand his greatness more than those who, by their attacks, have made proof of his strength. The hardness of the flint is known to none so well as to those who strike it. I offer myself to all attacks, like a solitary rock in a shallow sea, which the waves never fail to beat from wherever they come, but which cannot, therefore, move from its place nor even wear out, however many years it may take, may incessantly run against it. Tied to me, make haste over me. I will vanquish you by enduring your beginning. Everything that strikes against what is firm and invincible only injures itself by its own violence. So look for some soft, yielding object to pierce with your darts. But have you spared time to peer into other men's evil deeds, and sit in judgment over one? To ask how it is that this philosopher has such a spacious house, or such a good dinner? Do you look at other people's pimples while you yourself are covered in countless ulcers? This is as if someone who has been devoured by scabies points out with contempt for the moles and warts on the bodies of the handsomest men. Reproach Plato for seeking money. Reproach Aristotle for obtaining it. Democritus for disregarding it. Epicurus for spending it. Hurl Phaedrus and Alcibiades into my own teeth. You who reach the height of enjoyment whenever you have the opportunity to imitate our vices. Why do you not cast your eyes around you at the evils that are tearing you to pieces on all sides, some attacking you from without, others burning in your own breasts? However little you may know your own place, mankind has not yet reached the point where you can have leisure to wag your tongues to the reproach of your superiors. This you do not understand, and you have a countenance that does not correspond to your condition, like many men who sit in the circus or the theater without knowing that their house is already in mourning. But I, looking forward from a high point, I can see that storms are threatening you and will burst over you in torrents sometime later, or are near you and about to sweep away everything you own. Why, though you are scarcely aware of it, is there not at this moment a whirlwind swirling and confusing your minds, making them seek and avoid the same occurrences, now lifting them high, now sinking them? All rights reserved. Copyright 2022. Virtual Books, etc.